And thanks for bearing with us.
Yes.
Yeah, welcome. We're going to do Town Hall. We just launched our first DLC, which is big for us. Congratulations, Annie. So yeah, we've got a ton of questions. Doug's going to start reading them. And
whether he likes it or not.
And we'll see how this goes.
I hate reading text. All right. Yeah, let's start off with the first DLC question. We have this one. Does the host...
Yeah, we took a bunch of them and organized them into this doc, so I guess you guys probably can't see the doc we're looking at, but we'll go through them.
Doc is private. They shouldn't see it. Does the host require the DLC for it to be available during the campaign, or can the DLC stuff appear if a guest has the DLC?
Patrick?
Yeah, let's lay it out.
Yeah, so we set up the DLC so that I am here. Can you not hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me? Okay.
I can hear you, yes.
So yeah, the DLC is set up so that...
Only writing, never reading.
Everyone can use the DLC as long as at least one person has it. It doesn't have to be the host. It can be one of the clients. It's set up so that if you then put some of those heroes into your legacy, when you bring them back in, you will be able to keep any theme skins from the DLC that you have kept, but if you go off of them, then you will not anymore, and DLC armors will be reverted back to regular armors unless you have the DLC.
Yep. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. We wanted it to be fairly nice, like fairly permissive. So yeah, anybody can play with it as long as one person in your multiplayer has it.
All right. Yeah. Next, Annie, did you design all the new skins from scratch for this DLC, or were any of them reworked old concepts, previous iterations of the non-DLC themes, etc.?
That's an interesting question. Actually, I was thinking about this, and like I am pretty sure almost all, if not almost all of them, were new for the DLC. I think we had, yeah.
Like maybe if anything, there was like something you had thought about doing previously, but then never executed.
We thought about doing previously. Yeah. But not executed. Yeah, we had the skins based on the achievements, and those, those were the ideas that we had then, and then so now there were some more ideas now. But there wasn't a lot of like scrapping or pulling from old stuff. It was mostly new stuff for this. If that answers the question.
Yeah.
Will the DLC and some community favorite mods work well together?
Probably. I guess the only issues would be if some of the mods make assumptions based on like some of the armor layer drawings. You might get some weird visual overlap where sort of visual assumptions clash, but mechanically, I don't see there being any problems.
Right. So here's kind of a question for anyone / everyone. Which transformation / theme is your favorite and why? Which pet from the game would you want to have? I'll answer first. I think my favorite has always been Star theme. I just think it's so pretty. And I think the pet that I would take is a Goguen, the little rock guy from the recent...
I was going to say Celestial and a Goguen, because Celestial's beautiful and a Goguen is adorable.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Okay. Oh, yeah, of course.
I always called him Agagen.
No.
I don't know, man. We never really talked about him. A Goguen. Okay. I'll say it correctly from now on.
I like tree theme and probably
as your hero, would you want it?
I was thinking in real life.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because I was thinking critter would be cool, but it would probably wreck your house
That's a fair point.
bit. But
Ghost cat.
oh, ghost cat. That might be a fun one. It'd be hard to find. No, my favorite theme has always been wolf theme. One of my favorite heroes was a wolf hunter who was a beast, like a
Was
little
that
beast.
Logway?
Huh?
No, it's someone else.
Yeah. Frenzy's a good ability.
No.
Frenzy's a good ability for wolfing. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with the wolf. Probably critter too. Critter's just though Shadowcat is an interesting option.
You there, Patrick?
Yes, I am there now.
What is Patrick like?
My audio interface decided to
Good
have
enough.
like a 7-second
Well,
break and then decided to not
let's
do
move
audio
on.
at all.
I'll
so,
move to the next question. What are some of the hardest playthroughs that you've experienced? Was it a matter of skills/builds, or due to the role-playing choices acquired?
Hardest playthroughs?
Jackson, do you have something for this?
It's kind of a classic. It is the walking lunch, of course, 100 calamity roll with. I couldn't do farmers. I know there's someone out there who's insane and is able to do a farmers only run. I couldn't do it, so I did the just tier 1 legacy heroes, and through a method of hiding like a coward continuously until my heroes were strong enough to get a broken build going, I was actually able to kind of find basically ways to break the AI on maps where there were really small thoroughfares, and so I would just cast Meteor Strike into rooms over and over and over again until they were cleared out.
Wow.
And I used Crystal Chrysalis to block the doorway with my gem character.
Sounds fun.
It was honestly very thematic and great. But I'm never doing it again because 100 calamities is just stupid. It's just ridiculous.
Gosh.
I don't know if Patrick is. I can't hear him
Can you
anymore.
not hear me?
So maybe he's
I'm
talking.
here now.
Oh no.
Bummer.
I bet he has a good hardest playthrough.
I feel like.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I don't. Game's too easy. Just kidding. But I just don't play it too hard.
Chat, you can hear me, right?
Yeah, let's move on. What are the staff's favorite monsters? Mine, I have, I think, 3 candidates. My first is Caliban, the big claw monster from Ulstrix. I think
Caliban.
I also love the Draven Fangbow from Kvan, and Father Fungus, because gosh, look at him.
He's so annoying.
Yeah.
There are 2 weird ones, I think, and they're both Morthagi, funnily enough. Without spoiling anything, in the Enduring War campaign, one of the final bosses is just so cool and monstrous, and I'm pretty sure most players don't choose that ending path. It's an awesome fight, and you just have to see it. And then the other one is called the Gentleman, and he's the boss fight for a Morthagi generic campaign. So like the very final fight, if it's Morthagi, you'll get him, and he's just so big and looming and freaky, and he's just great. Yeah, those are definitely my favorites. The others have killed my heroes too often for me to remember.
Get mad at him.
I'm really fond of Batchby. I just love the art. Yeah.
Batchby was one of the early Morthagis that came out.
Yeah, kind of just like
a little more humanoid.
Really just kind of
than a lot
captured
the
the
other
whole
ones.
thing for me.
Yeah, with the skull. I don't know if I have a favorite one to play against, but I think like one of my favorite ones to draw was the I think the name of it ended being Althun the Salt Witch. Just the Silence Gorgon. Wearing the stuff with like kind of braided beard. That was one that some of the monsters, like I had to try them like 18 times and they just won't go. But that one just like came out on the first try. It was like bam. So I have a good association with it, even when it destroys me in a playthrough or something.
Jackson, can you tell Nate and Annie to
Can
join the huddle?
Can any of the other? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Cool. Yeah. So, Patrick, did you have an answer for this question?
Remind me of the question. Sorry, I'm so deep into troubleshooting this system.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite monster?
What's my favorite monster?
Oh,
I really like the Drowvin in general. I feel like once we did that overhaul on them and added the healing to them, it made them a lot more interesting. I kind of like Haunts. They're just, they really require you to
Yeah.
flank. And it makes great use of things like Thunderstomp and Indignance and other things where like you've got to do that thing to get the stealth off of them. Okay, there is echo.
Wait, we're getting Patrick echo now?
Oh,
I
could
think
that
it
be
was
coming from
Nate's.
there we
Nate
go.
and Andy?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Okay,
Turned off our huddle mic, so it should help.
gotcha.
Okay. Sorry. Carry on.
Yeah, that was
we're
all for
getting
me.
s-
I like
Yeah,
this.
Yeah, we're getting echo from the huddle to
I'm sorry.
stream. It's okay. It's okay.
I could like try to plug in headphones, but then
I have earbuds
yeah, do
downstairs.
that.
Do a cute like indie movie call.
Yeah,
Where,
we
like one earbud and the other. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Next question. What's your favorite of the new skins? My
wait for Annie.
my favorite of the new skins is the divine version of the green theme. It's just like right up my alley as far as it's very like Ghibli-esque. I like that a lot.
I think for me, it's got to be the Galaxy skin for the Celestial theme because it was really fun reworking the particle effects for all the Celestial abilities to fit in with the more like swooshy, purpley vibe compared to the kind of just bright blue. Yeah, that one's beautiful.
Yeah. What about Patrick?
I guess referring to
Favorite
Jackson
new
bringing up
skin.
particles, I had a lot of fun making the new particle effects for the Helix fire theme because they intersect with each other like that, and it was just a lot of thinking about what math I wanted to use to make that happen properly.
What's your favorite new theme skin?
New theme skin? I've got a running theme going, but I think the wolf heads, just because I've had a lot of wolf hunters and they always looked exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I would get them all mixed up. And I would be almost kind of sad when I got a new wolf hunter because I'm like, I want to give them the wolf head, but now I can't tell them apart. But now I can tell them apart again.
All the
And
expressions.
I kind of like that kind of, the dark. Oh yeah, no, there's like a kind of dark, like kind of one. And when you get skeptical, his little ear goes down, and I like that.
Nice.
I always forget it happens, and then it happens, and I'm like, oh yeah.
Nate, how about you?
I don't know. I like one of the new skeletons, and I don't know the names of them.
Is it the mummy
One
one?
with a hood and one where it's like mummy wrap.
Oh, the mummy wrapped one I like. And gosh, what was the other one? That's the magma theme. No, I don't, that's old. I'm bad. This is why I didn't want to answer, and then you made me answer.
All right, yeah, we should probably pick up the pace, huh? There's a bunch of
We're moving.
Does anyone on the team play the game in their free time themselves? How often, if so?
That's testing. That's hard work.
That's a tough question.
Hard work.
You do though.
I kind of do.
I know Annie does for me, and I'm not going to pull a Tom Holland here, so no spoilers. But there is something that we've been working on that has definitely pulled me in on weekends, and I'm just like, yeah, I just want to play this. Like, yeah, I'll be testing, but
No, yeah.
It's fun. I kind of just want to play it.
Same
Which is
thing. I've been
pretty
doing it
impressive
too.
for this game, considering I've been playing it for a hot minute. So yeah, I do. It's fun.
Yeah, it's always hard for me to read my own stuff, so I try to avoid that.
No, I mean at this point it's a different sort of thing where where I play very fast and loose and sloppy. Kind of just like blast through it, but I enjoy the. I don't know. I like the pattern of it. Yeah. I like the fact that it's different every time. And I'll still call down to Nate like, "Oh my God, the drama that just happened with my heroes. This was what just happened here."
Yeah.
Yeah, Nate, you previously worked at large studios, including Riot, before co-founding Worldwalker. What lessons did you take away from your time at bigger studios, and how do they inform the culture at Worldwalker?
Yeah, I definitely learned a lot through the course of my career. There's a lot of technical stuff, but there's a lot of culture stuff too. There's the thing that I think Riot in particular does really well is being player focused. They take it really seriously, and they say it all the time. And but yeah, I really found it to be true. I really like that a lot about Riot, that they focus intensely on what the player wants, what players are saying. They take player communication really seriously. And so that was something that for us, especially in the early days with Wildermyth, we didn't have a name. We didn't have anybody who believed in what we were doing. We would just take the game around and show it to people, and we would get feedback, and we would aggressively address all of the feedback. And that is something that we tried to carry forward. Just like really listening to all the feedback and trying to understand where it was coming from, because you can't always just sort of follow what people say, but you have to like dig into it and understand where it's coming from and then address the root causes.
It's very psychological.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other stuff, like big companies are just sort of different from small companies in a lot of complicated ways. And so a lot of that stuff doesn't necessarily transfer to a small team. But yeah, I mean, I think in general, it's impossible to not pick up some of that culture when you're working at a place like that.
Cool. Patrick, what's been one of the most challenging, persistent, or memorable bugs to fix? Also, Jackson.
So the one that I like to bring up, even though I feel like it's probably not the type of bug that this question is asking for, but just at one point, Steam Workshop uploads just stopped working altogether. And I was like, how could this happen? Like, we haven't changed anything. We haven't put out a new build or anything. And it turns out that the number of total Steam Workshop items in the Steam Workshop had reached the maximum integer number, and I had been storing the ID as an integer. So it had gone from max integer to negative integer. And that's just it's a very classic bug, so it was kind of fun to.
It's very classic, myself. Yeah.
It's the Gandhi firing nukes and civilization bug, so it's fun.
Did you have an answer, Jackson?
No, my kind of love-hate ones are the ones that they're bugs that on their face have one initial problem with them. And then we fix that problem, and then about 3 to 6 months later, they'll come back around. And there's another spoke to the wheel that we didn't see because we fixed the first part and it looked like it was working, and then the second spoke appeared. And so then we have to fix that, and then the wheel finally turns to the third one another 3 to 6 months later when I'm like, how is this bad? How is this still a problem? And then it gets fixed, and then another one appears. But yeah, and that happened a fair amount with abilities where the base ability we find a bug with, we'd fix it, and then it turned out that the upgrade to that ability added a fun little tweak on the initial bug as well as adding that ability. And so yeah, that's become kind of a part of the process now that we've learned from is if there's a bug with the base ability, even if you fix it, you have to make sure it works with the upgrade, because there's a chance that it won't, and it'll be a totally different thing.
Yep.
Yeah, so Jackson.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, for me, it's just naked heroes.
Naked heroes. They keep
being naked.
It happens, yeah. It's been happening for years.
Yeah.
Oh, and sometimes it's just on the best comics too. My favorite. I got the one, it's the first recruit where they're coming back to town and they walk by somebody and then the person like turns and does a double take. It's all the heroes and just, and they're walking by like, hey, and then the person swings around and like wait a minute. Yeah, and it was perfect.
I want everything to always work. Jackson, what does being a tester for a game with as many moving parts as Wildermyth look like? And do you really get to play Wildermyth as your day job?
In the best way, being QA for Wildermyth means feeling stupid about 100% of the time. Because you can write up testing plans and you can go through and be really methodical and being aware of the changes that have just been made to the game and kind of using your intuition to decide, okay, what is this likely to affect? And then just be completely wrong over and over again that no, it turns out that this affects a completely, unforeseen aspect of the game. And good, next time you test that too. And so, yeah, it is a practice of constantly being wrong and then slowly being right more of the time. And that's kind of the comfort that comes from it. And yes, I the first thing one of my professors told me in college is that you are not going to love every game you get to work on, and you just have to just get used to it. And then he was proven wrong when the first game job I got, I loved working on and I loved playing. And Wildermyth was very much kind of like a game that I loved immediately. When it was in pre-alpha and we had a quarter of the abilities and it was just a very raw thing. So yeah, I feel very fortunate that this is my day job, that I get to play a game that I actually just adore by itself.
Yeah, basically you talk yourself into a job. We put out the pre-alpha, and you just kept emailing in bugs, and at a certain point I felt bad that we were getting all this value and you weren't getting any compensation, so we had to pay you.
I'm so grateful.
It's worked out well.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, for everyone, how often do we play through our game with the entire team?
Oh, not often enough.
Not often enough. Yeah.
We've done
once every few months, it seems like.
Yeah.
We did a little multiplayer test not that long ago for DLC.
Yeah.
But it was more like it.
But I also feel like when we get to comics where you have to make decisions, it's going to be a race for us to pick the choice we want. We have differing opinions.
What is your favorite build for each class? I'll give my answer.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
My answer is I like a stalwart warrior. I like an Amber Arrows hunter, and I like a tanky mystic with Earth Scribe and a leaf enchanted staff.
Nice.
Thank you.
With our thing, we're not supposed to talk about that much. I've been having so much fun with warriors, which just kind of in general in it, and if you can get super long reach, broad swipes, and blood rage with sentinel going, and they are not sentinel, whatever it is, the one where they jump. I don't know, where they're jumping around and just AoEing huge
with broad
huge swathes of monsters. Yeah, it gives them that's been a fun one.
For me, I think it's support warrior with lots of common abilities like aid and wolf call, which is not a common ability, but just kind of subverting it, and they basically soak damage and support the rest of the team, who are the real damage dealers, because then you get to poison mystic, poison hunter, which is probably the strongest build in the game, and anyone who can play
Controversial.
Because you add heroism, and then you're applying 12 poison every turn, and it's just easy. And then for Mystic, it's actually Earth Scribe Mystic using bone walls to just split up enemies and kind of make most of them waste their turns trying to break through the individual pieces of scenery. And then you create endless pieces of scenery for your other Mystics to just bone lance, which is a very strong ability just on the face of it. And so you can kind of split up maps in a cool way. So yeah.
I don't know if I actually.
I just like wolf call.
Favorite
movement
build. I think this is also probably true of Nate, but I never ever re-roll abilities. I always take from one of the 3 or 4 I'm offered. And I love like getting random stuff and making the best of it. So just like I enjoy all of the builds of all of my heroes most of the time. But like Broad Swipe's warriors are pretty good.
Yeah, I really like Wolf Called, Through Shot, and I always build Glass Cannon Mystics.
Just all spell damage or whatever.
Yeah,
no
all
armor.
spell damage, no armor. Yeah. But I don't play on super high difficulty.
That's true. I don't either.
All right, so development questions. How much did the game change between its initial conception and the game we know and love today?
The whole concept.
The high
was
concept stayed really true, which was like
Fantasy
XCOM, where you cared about the soldiers. That was the concept. I think we stayed really true to that. But a lot of stuff in the middle changed. We had no idea how we were going to do the Overland map.
Comics didn't exist.
Comics didn't exist at all.
Yeah.
Douglas and I had very different ideas originally about the kind of text that was going to be in the game. For me, I was imagining stuff that was much more like short and procedural, like just really short prompts and
I don't write anything short.
Yeah. So he would come back with these like long, beautiful stories, and there was just like a period of, I don't know, a couple of years when we were
kind of trying to get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, we were trying to just figure that out, and then comics sort of came out of that back and forth. So a lot of the specifics changed a lot. The combat went through a lot of iterations. We had a bunch of combat mechanics that we discovered.
Like action points.
We started with like time
very
points
granular
or
little
action points. We tried a bunch of different systems for that. We tried like this whole heroism system where there was going to be this like heroism currency that you could spend. Yeah, I like interfusion mostly. Once we got the high concept for interfusion, it stayed pretty much itself. But yeah, a lot of the abilities were worked and reworked many times.
Yeah, okay. Are there any features that had significant development put into them, but ultimately ended on the cutting room floor? Can you share what any of those were?
Yeah, I had a whole danger simulation for like how dangerous the wilderness was. There's I really love simulating things, and just the idea that there would be like the wilderness level or the population dynamic is another one where how populated the lands were going to be, a big deal, and that was going to be simulated, and that was going to play into your score and all this stuff, and like affect the game in all these interesting ways. And so danger and population would be these like underlying simulations, and like keeping the land safe would like feed those, and it just ended up taking away from the core concept of the game. Like focus
on the heroes.
Yeah, we want you to focus on the heroes, and like trying to game these systems was taking away from that. And that's why the Overland ended up relatively simple. Is not because we didn't have ideas, it's because we couldn't figure out how to make those ideas good without taking away from the core impact of the game.
We had a whole other like resource called monster lore for a long time.
Oh my gosh, we were going to do research. We were going to have monster parts.
Yeah, and the monster lore, you would spend that to basically make individual weapons like better at killing different enemies.
Yeah.
But it ended up, I'm trying to remember why that eventually.
We ended up getting rid of that because it was like, it wasn't impactful enough. So you would like enchant a weapon so that it would do like +2 to like certain enemies. It was like very segmented. It was like this deals +2 to Thrixel and or like to Thrusks and Dweavers, and like you could never remember.
It felt very like super swingy, and like you didn't guess the right monster that was going to be in the fight.
You had to like remember what monster that particular weapon was good at, and you wouldn't remember it, and like you wouldn't notice it when you got it anyway. So yeah, we kept we kept iterating in favor of stuff that was more visible, that the player would notice when it happened, instead of stuff that just kind of happened in the background.
Eventually I think we switched over to the elemental weapons, and then there wasn't really a lot for monster lore left to do, so it got
Yeah. It's also a thing where if you have a replayable game, like the second time you get the research, like you don't care, you've already read it. So I don't know.
Another thing.
Yeah, just research the whole thing just didn't end up making sense. Yeah.
Block and dodge is another thing that got cut.
Block and dodge. Yeah.
So block and dodge still exist, but there used to be a stat called wield that impacted both what your weapons were like and what enemies' attacks were like, where there were fast weapons and there were like heavy weapons, and dodge was good against fast weapons and block was good against heavy weapons. But it ended up again being
the other way around.
Well, no, dodge is good against fast weapons. No, yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Dodge was good against slow weapons.
Yes.
Block was good against fast weapons.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it ended up again being hard to understand what was going on. Like you couldn't really tell which enemy attacks were fast or slow, and there wasn't a good way to tell whether the enemy had a lot of block or dodge either. So it just ended up adding complication in a way that was hard to understand.
Yeah, basically anything that was going to make you like have to switch out your weapons every turn and like remember who had what weapon to optimize your turn was like
cut.
Yeah, it ended up being cut in favor of just kind of simplicity. And
there was going to be a whole thing where like choosing which heroes to bring on a specific mission was going to be important, and we cut that because it was like, you care about the heroes you care about, and we don't want to.
If you're going to be sad because you can't bring your favorite hero, like
all right. Question from the chat: how many cats were on the Wildermyth team?
I've got 2.
So one here.
This is Coda.
Well, Chloe.
Cody's in front of me.
Oh, Chloe was.
Yeah.
May she rest in peace.
May she rest in peace. Chloe here and Baxter.
Yeah.
We've got Cassiopeia and Orion.
You guys, I don't know that. Yeah, you guys.
All the Fosters.
All the Fosters.
Yeah.
They all
Patrick, what? You have cats?
Yeah, I said that. Yeah, I have 2 cats, Coda and Odie.
Okay.
What are they?
I have no cats. I have no one.
All right.
Not even a plant.
No plants either.
We'll get him some plants.
We'll get him some plants.
He'll hate it.
Yeah.
What were some of the developmental decisions that felt like they got the most pushback, but which you as a team felt were integral to the game and needed to be kept?
Nate, go on your rants.
Oh,
you have like at least 2.
I have inventory.
You have inventory healing in classes, right?
Inventory healing in classes. Those are the big ones, right? It's like those are big things that are parts of many RPGs, and we cut them for strong reasons. Yeah. Well, we have only 3 classes and not more.
Oh, sure.
So
I think some of that was art because we did different rigs.
Well, yeah. So let's see. Inventory. Okay. So first of all, being able to managing inventory isn't fun. It's not fun.
That's not
hot take.
Trading items between heroes makes heroes less of people and more of soldiers or interchangeable pawns. Having them keep their gear makes them feel like individuals, makes them unique and iconic. So for all those reasons, but mostly because I don't like managing inventory, we didn't do inventory. Healing, this is something that I did pick up at Riot. Healing slows down the game. It slows it down, it makes it less deadly and less dramatic. We also wanted a world where injuries would be permanent and consequential. And if there was magical healing, that would just kind of weaken the fiction. So that
you could just undo all these things that were happening.
Yeah, and with classes, a lot of that was the art, right? It's like we're going to draw these 6 rigs, right? Like male and female, warrior, hunter, mystic. We want to be able to fit all of the archetypes into those 3 rigs, and that's just the design that we went with, and like changing it was not going to bring a lot of value. So yeah, it's like you got to make every decision. That's something I believe really strongly, and make every decision.
Were the in-game editors and labs originally designed as developer-only tools, or was making them accessible for modding always the idea?
It was always in the back of our head that we would love if people would pick this stuff up and use it.
Yeah.
That was, pretty early on. We were talking about people being able to add more content because you had built this game, like the base stuff, so that we could just keep piling content on as much. And then from there, it's a really, really short jump to let everybody else, let everybody get in on it.
Yeah, I think like as we started to use it too, it was like, oh, this is fun. Other people might like doing this.
Yeah. Especially as the tools got, they
better.
got polished a lot.
Yeah.
It's a huge,
Yeah, what was an exciting aha moment, or sorry, let me take that again. What was an exciting aha moment or breakthrough that occurred during the game's /DLC's development?
For the game, comics.
Yeah.
For me, that's the one that stands out the most.
Yeah.
We tried
Also,
a bunch of ways of delivering that. We tried kind of an FTL style prompt and choices. We tried, like, I mocked up a few things, like a kind of a JRPG style with the comics that would like come up, but it looked like the heroes were texting each other, and it was kind of weird the way we tried to make it work.
Oh,
No, those were the two I thought.
Another one that I think was big was just villains, like
villains. That's another one. Yeah.
A
We
villain
weren't going to do villains
campaign.
for a long time.
Yeah.
And by that we mean the campaigns, having campaigns instead of just having generics.
Yeah.
I think the smaller one
that was big. Just like adding that
Big
overarching story made just a huge difference in like being able to care about what was going on.
Having a beginning, a middle, and an end that felt cohesive. Yeah.
A small one was with mystic design initially, because we always knew we were going to have scenery have different.
Oh yeah.
And then once we kind of started branching out, we kind of unanimously were like, oh, what if there were like advanced abilities that you get for the more kind of deeper levels of things like statues or, oh man, now I'm blanking on all of them, statues, machinery,
books.
Yeah.
And so those are some of my favorite abilities still in game, are the kind of weird little ones that come from the lesser seen pieces of scenery, because it makes you excited to see a piece of scenery, which is kind of a cool thing.
There was a point like we had Interfusion on the table, and there was a point where we're like, well, it's time to actually implement this. And so we implemented all the Interfusion abilities, and like the game kind of came alive tactically.
Initially it was just Fire Leash and Splinter Blast,
Yeah.
and they were great.
For a long time.
There's more here.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking of
Splinter Blast and Fire.
when we added, I forgot what the initial question was now, but when we added ability upgrades, because we just, I don't know if it was quite an aha, but we doubled the amount of abilities in the game basically, and it makes for so many more interesting builds than there were before.
Yeah, I think we had gotten a lot of feedback that the ability pool is very wide but not super deep, and saying, oh, okay, all right, let's try some upgrades to really let you go, okay, no, this is this is zealous. I'm going all in on Zealous Leap.
Right. Yeah. It also made them much easier to balance against each other, and I think it was just it was a really good change overall.
Yeah, because there are a few things. I think Ignite, where it's like I can never seem to use the base one, but once I get it upgraded, so I'll take it, knowing that if I can get that upgrade, then I'm set for a little while, kind of. I can use that a bunch.
Okay. Each campaign creature faction, like the latest official Sunswallower's Wake, with the introduction of blinding abilities for enemies, each show up with a particular set of skills that make them a nightmare for unprepared Yonderlings. How do you determine the core fight mechanic for the enemies, and then how do you come up with the newer opponents that keep us on our toes so well, forcing us to rethink our strategy? I think for me, like, I feel like more than being challenging or creating challenges, our focus, like, first and foremost with these things is telling the story of the faction or of the particular monster. So, like, what are some unifying traits that make these creatures, like the Deepest or Marthagi or Draven, what makes them specifically them, and what makes them feel like a separate faction? And it's often like tied to like how we see them and the cultures that they have. And then in creating that, we like consider how challenging it'll be and whether it'll be fun to play against, and then kind of what the counterplay would be too. But we generally like tune it towards being interesting most of all, which can mean challenging, but also just like, does it add texture to the battle? And like, are you making different decisions because it exists?
Yeah, 100%. Like, first of all, it needs to be thematic. It needs to make sense and like match the art and match the lore of like what that monster is.
Is this monster a protector? Is it an assassin?
Yeah,
Is it like a, yeah.
And then we look for things that are fun to play against, stuff that has counterplay, and that especially that pushes you in a new direction, that pushes you to change what you do on your turn. That's sort of the mark of a good, successful.
Because we've played it so much, we can kind of, especially like Jackson Over, probably like it gets in a place where it's like, okay, I have my go-to strategies on this, and we go, okay, well, what are those? Let's pick out those and let's disrupt them a little bit.
Right.
And so eventually you will come up with some new go-to strategies, and then those are the ones that are ripe to be poked at.
Nate touched on this, and I think it's kind of, it goes a little quiet, but a lot of times Annie will have drawn up monster art, and we will design off of that, and so it ends up being, we're kind of creatively funneled pulling from narrative and then visuals at the same time. So we ask, does it feel thematic for this group? And then look at this guy. What is he going to be doing in this fight? And it really, it pushes us in directions that I think we wouldn't have been able to go in if we didn't have either to pull from initially, or if we only had one.
Yeah, we've definitely had a few, where it's been kind of a back and forth, where it's, I'll come up with a thing, and you guys all add an ability and go, well, like, okay, but this ability we have like fits the art really well, but isn't super fun to play against. It'd be cool if it could do a slightly different thing. Like, oh, okay, all right, we'll add a whatever. We'll like make it a little different.
Okay. Any more clues about the second DLC in the works that looks like it may focus on special loot opportunities?
It's I think we can say that it is a game mode.
Game mode.
Yeah, we'll say that.
Yeah,
that's a pretty big hint. I don't know. It's fun. It's pretty fun. We're enjoying it.
Yeah. I read that you aren't too happy with the Overland mechanics. Do you have ideas that could work better? I wish we did.
Man, I wish we did. So the DLC ditches them. The second DLC.
What?
Oh
my gosh.
Huge reveal. Yeah. It's really tricky. So we want the Overland mechanics, when they're working really well, it's like you should care about places, like defending them should matter, but it's really hard to balance that because it's so easy to get bogged down if we put, defending against incursions isn't moving the story forward. And like that's kind of the only way that the monsters have to put pressure on you to do Overland actions. It's just a tricky problem. And the Overland is also, it's so much more abstract and less concrete that it's kind of intrinsically less interesting. And it just takes the focus away from the heroes, which is...
Yeah, it's very zoomed out. It's very abstracted.
So it's like we could make it a good board game. And like, that's not a bad idea, but it's like, are we then pushing away people who would play Wildermyth for the characters? And like, isn't that what we should focus on? So that's why we kind of err on the side of making it a little too simple, a little too easy and minimal. It's tough. It's, I don't know.
Right now, for me,
its role kind of ended up being the connected.
The Overland, the simplicity of it. While I agree that like yes, there's not too much to it. That it does, one thing that it does do quite well, at least for me personally, is it creates that feeling of time between events that are happening, of like time passing, which I think is very important because our events are disconnected from each other, and if you just went from one event to another without anything happening in between, it would feel a little weirder. But because you have that time of traveling, you can envision that these heroes are still interacting in between those times and fill in the blanks.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question is, what is the biggest takeaway you have from doing early access?
I will say combat clarity, UI clarity, all of that stuff we worked on for way longer than we thought we had to. We just kept getting feedback about it, and we kept trying to improve it and make it more clear and easier to learn.
It took a very long time before players understood interfusion.
Yeah.
Teaching interfusion was really difficult.
Yeah, that was in early access. We were a very good fit for early access.
Yeah.
Because we were kind of unknown, we were kind of flying under the radar a little bit, and so we were able to launch in this kind of soft way
where there were not super high expectations
where
on
we
us,
weren't
maybe?
going to be absolutely slammed by a huge mountain of feedback coming at us.
And we were able to like quickly respond to the feedback that we did get and turn it around quickly and just like do that consistently. And that was,
because that was what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like that was the name of the game at that point, was respond to feedback. Yeah.
I think too, just like in terms of content production, it sort of like helped give the green light to like, okay, like we can spend our resources on like making more of this stuff because people are.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Getting a much bigger positive response than, well, anyway, we were thrilled with like the early access response, and that was really validating and let us commit to
that's a good point.
Building out the content.
When you're running an indie studio, there's always,
are we going to be able to keep doing
we going to be able to keep doing this? Are we going to have another few years to work on this kind of a thing?
Yeah, so that was great.
Okay. How early on was it decided that Gorgons would be the antagonist of the introductory campaign and the other enemy factions would get full 5-chapter story campaigns?
How did that happen?
So like, I think it was basically like we had a tutorial and the tutorial started with Gorgons because Gorgons were kind of the flagship monster from the beginning.
They've always been the sort of the first, and
they were the first faction that we came up with for sure, and that we kind of fleshed out.
Yeah, so as we were like, let's try doing villains, like we talked about earlier, that was kind of it was kind of a proof of concept, the first villain, Ulstrix. So that was a 3-chapter thing that we just wrote and sort of tested out ourselves to see like, is this working? Does it fit with the random events? Does it like feel like we can make the game this way? And I think like we felt good about it. And then from there, it was about just like kind of pushing our limits with the others and filling out 5-chapter stories because that was what we felt was the core Wildermyth experience, I think. But others can talk about that. Were any of the other creatures that exist in the world of Wildermyth, like Lostlings, nature spirits, or Winterlock, originally designed to be part of a full faction?
Rorchen were a thing for a while.
Yeah, no, not those ones specifically.
The nature spirits, maybe.
The nature spirits. I think we were originally going to do a faction, and then it just kind of didn't feel great. We never ended up developing it.
Yeah, I think
fighting nature spirits.
For my part, I think these were all meant to be one-off creatures, kind of like pieces of folklore that texture the universe. So like my approach is usually like I want to show a glimpse of a character and of a world, but let the bulk of what's behind them kind of like remain hidden, so that there's kind of this room for imagination or this room for like imagining what else might be behind them. So you have like Winterlock, who's kind of this eccentric, ill-explained creature that like there's hints of like a dark history and stories, but like having that be something that the player themselves can sort of come up with and think about and imagine is cool and something that I like encouraging.
Yeah,
It's also fun. You kind of this is a thing you've talked about as a DM too, dropping little story breadcrumbs for yourself along the way that you can then later, like at a good moment, maybe come back to. And so we have all these, I think like the Crow Woman was like one of them, the Oraway God was one of them, where you can kind of, these are things you can draw from, bring back around, and somebody be like, oh, I remember that thing from the previous whatever. So it's been kind of a slow build of.
Yeah, I also think it's just, if you've got 5 monstrous factions, it would be weird if they were all like perfectly balanced and the only weird things in the world. So I think it's great that there are a bunch of other weird things in the world that don't, have to rise to the level of, your main foe. But that kind of just adds a lot of texture.
Yeah, okay. What were the main cultural or media influences that were pooled together into creating this vibrant world with customs, songs, and individual philosophies and so forth? There's an emphasis on being close to the earth, and with that, a beautiful eye for detail involving natural processes, but simultaneously a love of the human spirit to endure hardship.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, you're right to identify those as kind of primary topics in our universe. I'll say that on the writing side, especially, and the world building side, I think my primary fantasy influences are like Tolkien, Miyazaki, and probably Terry Pratchett are the 3 I think of. And then I also want to say that like a large portion of how I convey the world is sort of informed by a teacher I had in college, this wonderful poet named Teddy Macker, and kind of a credit to the writers and cultures he pointed me towards. So the thing that kind of runs through all these works is just a reverence for the world, an attention to small things, and sort of taking sensuous joy in life's mysteries and peculiarities. So to put names to some of those, it's Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf, and kind of just Old English poetry in general, especially like the sonic quality of it, the alliterative quality of it. Chinese poetry, which all of this stuff is read in translation, sadly, but especially like Lu Yu and Tu Fu. Native American storytelling in the forms I've been able to absorb it. The poetry of Kenneth Rexroth and W.B. Yeats. There's an American writer, Rick Bass, that just his sentences I really love. And then the French writer, Jean Giono, who's also very amazing. And then I also want to mention just like Scottish folk music, which I've been listening to since I was a kid, and particularly the Tanhill Weavers, who have a bunch of really great renditions of traditional Scottish folk music, and a lot of that stuff's like Robert Burns based, the poet Robert Burns. But yeah, that's a whole bunch about my literary background.
Yeah, I wanted to add that from the top-down side, like we really wanted this game to be about the heroes as a group making the big decisions, and like kind of following that line, it meant that there weren't going to be people that you were reporting to. You weren't going to be reporting to the king. You weren't going to be reporting to the town council or anybody like that. And that kind of led us to this world where there were these communities of people who lived mostly in the wilderness, and where 5 heroes really could make a big difference. There was no army coming to save you. Otherwise, why wouldn't they just send the army in the first place?
A question we asked ourselves many times as we played XCOM.
Yes.
You had nukes. Why weren't you using them? Yeah.
So yeah, that sort of led us to this idea, and I think definitely agreeing on the like Studio Ghibli stuff, and but then not wanting it to be grim but hopeful, and that is it's like Ghibli and Pratchett for me are big influences there. It's also like what you like to draw. We weren't going to do a grim dark game.
Yeah,
wasn't us.
Not a great fit. No.
Yeah, it's not any of us. Yeah. Wildermyth has a very unique writing style. How did you come up with the idea for it, and do you still like this style today?
It's been a long journey. It
Hyphens
has.
are for cowards.
Hyphens are for cowards.
We need to make that
We need
shirt.
that T-shirt.
Yeah.
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 I think the style is like, it's not something that you come up with an idea for, but it like kind of grew organically through a lot of trial and error, I think, like a lot of casting about. I think where we've ended up together is largely informed by like Annie's art and the pains and pleasures of speaking through the mouths of like procedurally generated characters. There's a lot of restriction that puts on us, but I think it's also a product of adaptation to the comic format we landed on. I will say that like I did always have the intention of approaching fantasy as magical realism, so I wanted to reveal the world very like sensuously and rely more on its like lyricism than its logic to make sense. So kind of like
the logic part. Double check that.
A world not desperate to explain itself was like kind of a guiding phrase, I suppose. Then I always wanted the characters themselves to speak very humanly from within whatever circumstances they encountered, and to talk very colloquially about their world and sound like they lived there. And then for the last part, I'm still happy with the style. And that includes the caveat that like the style is never really done evolving, I guess, and it's never so rigidly prescriptive that I feel like I can't like bend it and mold it to fit a moment or a joke. Yeah. Okay. Does anyone? All right. Is the pantheon complete for Wildermyth's eclectic deities?
Always room for one more.
Yeah. I think there's always more gods than the ones we see and speak of. Yeah. I think the way I explain gods in this universe to myself, because I don't explain it to anyone else, is it doesn't so much matter to them or to us if whether we perceive them. I think like with gods, the main guideline is basically like their concerns are not ours. They're kind of different animals operating on different levels of thought and serving functions that don't make sense to us. So they're not even necessarily higher thinkers than us. I think they could be a lot less complicated, in fact. Yeah, in this universe.
We're the cave god, all about.
Yeah, very like
caves, man. That's all.
Yeah.
Serving very specific functions.
Yeah.
Do we want to hop into the chat questions at all?
Oh yeah. What
do we have?
I think the first one I see here is what are your thoughts on Chat GPT and AI generated voices, and have
that is a fast evolving field.
It's evolving really fast. I think it is going to be for at least a while now. It's going to be a tool for developers to use in prototyping, and it's interesting in that way. I've thought about trying to use voices because one of the one of the big gaps between the work that we do and like what you see in AAA is that we can't do VO. It's just completely impossible for us to do it.
If you saw there's what the characters are saying, and if you saw the actual like long scrolling paragraph of text with a whole bunch of markup, sentences all like being chopped up into all these splits.
Or even just like anytime there's a name.
Yeah.
Right, like any name, any split, like it's impossible. So
unless it can take a really good guess.
The idea of being able to use AI voices for that is appealing, even if just for like accessibility reasons, so that people who have a hard time reading could play the game. It seems like a ton of work, and there's a lot of questions about, is it putting people out of work, and like, wouldn't you rather have humans doing that stuff? And that's tricky. I don't just from a technical point of view, I don't buy into a lot of the panic about AI. I think it's pretty far away from thinking for itself, and even if it could do such a thing, it's not likely to like take over the world or do anything silly like that. I think that like these programs are not animals. Like animals are sort of evolved from the ground up to want things, and programs are not, and that's a big difference. Oh, sorry, I'm just rambling. Patrick, you got anything?
I don't think so. Yeah, I did look into briefly when someone on the Steam forums had mentioned something like there are some things that are like, oh, AI voices or whatever, but it looks like they're paid, and also it's, oh, we have 5 choices, which, like, you got a lot more than 5 characters you need to voice. And yeah, it's just I have a lot of feelings about AI and ChatGPT, and both how cool they are and how many possibly terrifying things they open the doors to, including things like artists having their artwork stolen and etc. But I do think it has the potential to be very useful for something like this. It does bother me when some of our players, or like new players, are like, oh, is procedural, do you mean this is generated with AI? And I'm like, no, everything's handwritten.
Yeah. Everything's hands done. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump back into the doc. When a faction is absent, does it mean they are somewhere far away or do not exist in that story, or are they at peace with humans' heroes? I'll say canonically, no, they are not at peace, unless expressly stated. My canon for it is basically like that they're basically just elsewhere. It would be very crowded for everyone to be here at once.
I think that was, we were running into that at some point, was we just weren't able to build up the calamities that we wanted to, and the ones that you were fighting.
Yeah.
So
and I almost think we could take away another faction per game.
Just have 3.
And just have 3. But yeah, it's I've always thought of the Yondering Lands as a multiverse. I think of it as a stew, actually, where stories will bubble up till the surface is stew. And you only see the surface, but like there's stuff under there. And sometimes it's at the top, and sometimes it sinks back down. So it's just whatever's at the top of the stew.
An alphabet soup.
Yeah.
Okay. Doug, like many players, I had a strong emotional reaction to the Draven in All the Bones of Summer. Or Pjark. Could you tell us a little bit about the narrative design process for that campaign? Sure.
Pjark.
So
spoilers.
Yeah, Pjark.
I mean, it's
yeah. Should I not spoil it?
Should we? What if?
No, don't spoil.
What if I?
Let's see what you can do.
I don't know. Here,
I'll try not.
What can you tell us? Yeah, without.
I'm moving Doug into over a little bit, and then when I move him back, then we're done talking about all the bones spoilers. So if you want to mute now, mute now.
Oh yeah. So I think the Pjark. Well, yeah. Okay, not spoiling. So the campaign basically began as 4 just separate character sketches for those 4 Draven characters. So Versal, Thuvain, Pjark, and Kavan, and kind of just figure out what each of those characters wanted, and then the story kind of just sprang out of them very naturally, which was pretty surprising. I mean, it doesn't always happen. So kind of Versal's grand scheme, and then the shift from Pjark to Thuvain to Pjark and Kavan. I think the reason that Pjark even existed was that we had this 60-year timeline. So it just didn't make sense that Thuvain would stick around that whole time, or Versal would stick around that whole time. We had this dragon that was going to be the main villain, but the dragon's not essentially Draven, and it felt like we wanted to keep a Draven presence. So Pjark kind of was developed as that bridge. And then over time, really became this tragic hero antagonist for the party. But then I'll also say that while I did all this development on the Draven, it was necessary for the player's experience to focus on the human heroes. And so I needed, since the Draven were going to feel sort of heroic in their own way, I needed to sort of have a human character that had this like vein of like understanding, that had this vein of like trying to like see the Draven as people. And so that was sort of how the hunter human like protagonist came to be. And then again, because of the timeline, had to sort of focus it on a passing of the torch from parent to child. So that became the main feature of the human side of the campaign. And then thematically, this all just sort of like created the story about heirloom conflicts being passed down, and sort of the tragedy of that, the inescapability of that, and all the rest. Yeah, but it was a story that really came about quite naturally, and yeah. So the next one is for Annie. How did you decide which concepts to go with for the elemental spirits? How did you decide on leaf, water, earth, and fire as the 4 elements?
I feel silly after you gave this huge, like, thoughtful explanation of how this thing came about. There's a piece of concept art, I think, if you unlock a certain achievement, that shows what elemental spirits might have been.
Yeah, you just drew like 20 of them, right?
Yeah, there were a few. There were ones that
Yeah.
were more humanoid. There were ones that were kind of like more like little plants and bubbles and that kind of stuff. And there were the ones that looked kind of like foxes a little bit.
Mhm.
And I posted it up to the team and I said, which one do you guys like? And they all went the foxes. So I went, okay, let's call me the foxes. I did not think about the greater narrative significance of that. And in fact, I forget if this hits a question later on, but I'll go ahead and answer it now.
That's the next question, yeah. Do you want me to
yeah,
read it?
yeah.
Let's
go. Let's segue into that.
Yeah, was the fox style for the spirits an early design or something that stole the show? Was there any thought of mixing and matching the styles or letting them all show up?
So the answer, again, this is an unsatisfying answer, but it's the true one. That yeah, the little fox guys, we drew them very early on, and you stuck them on the loading page.
Right.
You put them on the loading page, it would randomly show one of them each time we loaded it up. So we were looking at their little faces for years.
Mm-hmm.
They did not exist in the game at all
Right.
for years until we switched over to elemental weapons.
Right.
And then we were so happy that we finally had a place for them to live.
Yep.
But we never wanted to get rid of them. We wanted to work them in somehow.
Yeah.
And very, very early on in some of those alpha days, we would get people going, what's up with the little guys on the loading screen? And we're like, I don't know. They're just kind of there.
Yeah,
But,
we always wanted them in there. We just needed
we always
to
wanted
find
them in there. Yeah, we
just find the place.
we needed a place for them to live. And then they started kind of showing up in events a little bit. But they found their place as the bestowers of elemental powers for weapons.
Yeah.
And then they kind of became sort of little unofficial mascots, because we have, aside from the Gorgon, we have 5 enemy groups. We have procedural heroes. We don't have a face of Wildermyth. Like, we maybe have the Gorgon, but it doesn't translate well to small sizes, and it's not super pleasant. And we wanted something a little friendlier, and so I think it was right before we launched, I ended up changing the app icon to one of the spirits, just because they've been there from the beginning. They kind of like reflect the world and the tone of something kind of mysterious, something that doesn't super explain itself, something very natural. That they kind of reflect all that pretty well, and so they've kind of sat as little unofficial mascots for quite a while.
This next question is kind of embarrassing. How long does it usually take for you guys to perfect an in-game procedural event or comic? I think it depends a lot on the narrative complexity of the event. So the biggest time difference kind of happens between an event with choices and one without. And then, since most of the non-plot events do have choices, kind of how complex the choices are, the outcomes can branch off quite a bit or create different scenes or include failure and success cases. The task of writing them becomes a lot more laborious. think like a light 2-choice simple outcome event, which is pretty rare, could take as little as a week. If the language, the more common timeline is in the neighborhood of like 3 to 4 weeks for a moderately sized event. And then it does feel like any event, light or big or medium, kind of has the potential to grow into a months-long slog. That's kind of like as a result of like the variation that we do, all the personality relationships, the outcome complexity, but then also like overwhelming all of that is basically like the human element of like, hey, how are you doing? Are you retreating into your cave, or are you writing well? And are you being a responsible human being outside of your cave? So yeah, it's very variable. Sorry.
Over time, the complexity of the writing has gone
Way up.
Way back in the day, we didn't used to. The first time somebody did an 11-way split for all personalities, we were like, that is completely excessive. Like, never do that. And now, I think almost every single, most lines have at least 11-way splits, if not more, for all the different relationships. We added family, that had to add a whole nother
the writing complexity is way up, and then also the visual complexity is way up.
That's true. Yeah, it started out a lot simpler.
Takes a long time.
Yeah, but something I also don't think Doug gets enough credit for is that Annie draws all the scenery in the background and art, and that goes into the comics. But then it's up to Doug to not only write the comics, but then place these pieces of art in ways that are appealing.
Yeah.
And over time, we're clever at using art assets we have to show such a wide variety of scenes that, if I had seen that I had to make something look like that, I'd be like, how am I supposed to do that with the art we have? So that's another element that I think we've gotten a lot better at.
It's funny.
That part's a lot of fun, honestly.
No, it's funny because I'll see something after you're done with it, and I'll see a panel, and I'll go like, because I can usually tell, like, I made all the pieces, I know what they are, but I'll look at it and go, how did you do that? How'd you put that thing together? He's like, oh, I tinted this and like did this, reflected this thing over, cut it off with this other piece, and like, I could have just drawn you that thing. No, it's fine. I did it. Oh, okay, cool. But it's a way that I wouldn't have done it, so it's fun to watch.
Yeah, I think the arting up of the things is pretty rapid as far as like assembling a scene, like kind of just like picturing it in your head and then translating it to the comic. It's pretty quick. Like I'm very fluent with like what assets there are, so I sort of know what I'm looking for as I do that. But yeah, cool. When you guys were making the main monsters, when the game was being developed, the story or the monsters come first?
Monsters.
Yeah, I think like
first campaigns. Yeah, campagns didn't come till
way later. Yeah, I mean,
but the monster development was like a back and forth.
We did a lot of talking about the nature of the monsters, the ecology, the lore, the like that sort of background stuff, which you generally but definitely the monsters were first.
Yeah, I think like overall it was like we had names of monsters, we had like sort of suggestions of what they were, and then Annie would come back with like a whole host of characters that like, oh, suddenly I know a lot more about these people because of just the art.
Yeah.
I also want to point out that someone earlier in the chat was talking about how it'd be cute to see Annie's take on grimdark monsters. And I think
they would all be wearing funny hats.
That I noticed coming into the game was that the monsters that were there, the concepts behind them can be incredibly dark.
Oh yeah.
Because like Morthagi are bone machines that are like cobbled together, and Thrixel are psychic bugs that that's terrifying. But rather than push the angle of these things are so scary, there's an element of kind of reflection to each of these monsters, and this is shown throughout the campaigns of the Thrixel just being different. They just think differently than people do, and their goals are often not great for the people currently living. Totally fair. It's worth fighting them, but it's not this kind of it's just dark and evil to be dark and evil. They are.
We definitely wanted to stay away from that.
Gorgons in particular are pretty horrifying. If you look at what they do to the animals and like the story behind it, but that isn't where we want to focus.
Yeah. All right, so I've heard that Wildermyth uses its own custom engine. If you were to make a new game, would you start from scratch again, or would you be inclined to reach for something off the shelf?
Yeah, so Wildermyth is written in Java. It uses a framework called libgdx, which is great, and I love it. But it is not a 3D engine. So, or I mean, well, it has, anyway, we don't use its 3D engine. We use a lot of the framework. But basically, the way that 3D scenes get drawn on the screen is pretty much mostly our code. I learned a lot, learned how to be a real game programmer and make my own engine. And I would absolutely not recommend it, and we won't be doing it again. The main issue with the code base that we have in Wildermyth is that Java won't go to consoles. There is just no path for it. And so in order to get on Switch and PlayStation and all that,
The whole thing needs to be.
it has to be completely rewritten.
Yeah.
And that's just a hideous
task.
It's just awful.
Mountain.
It's just awful, and we're never going to do it again.
Yeah. So, go on.
Oh yeah. So we're looking at existing game engines. We're a really small team, so we're not going to be writing our own C++ game engine or anything silly like that. We will definitely be using an existing game engine, but we are also looking at how we want to customize it in order to do the kind of work that we do, because the problem with most of the existing game engines is that they are 3D asset management pipelines, and we don't have any 3D assets. We don't have any 3D artists. We don't have any animators. We don't so most of the things that all of the main engines, Unreal, Unity, and Godot are focused on, we just don't do those things. And so it makes it this question of like, well, what are you getting out of this engine, and how would you like to use it? And what we want to get out of it is portability, mainly like cross-platform portability to PC, Mac, Linux,
You worked on Java
consoles.
because back when we very
Well,
first
yeah.
started Wildermyth, we were like, we might go on mobile. And then
Right.
it turned into a game that like, no, it's not going to mobile.
Yeah.
And I remember you thought like, oh, well, that'll be easy later on if we ever want to go to mobile.
That's
And,
true.
like,
Yeah.
turns out that was not going to happen.
Did you have?
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you have anything to add, Patrick?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't know. I've enjoyed using the Java engine. It's been like, I'm very familiar with Java, and so it was very comfortable for me. And gosh, IntelliJ makes such a nice IDE. But well,
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. I've been looking at Godot a lot. I like how relatively simple and accessible it is. I think it might be a good fit for the kind of stuff that we do. I think we will end up writing a lot of our own tools, no matter what we go with, which is a little bit frustrating from a producer point of view. But I think it's going to be the right choice.
Since it's kind of on topic, I'm just going to go to the question. Update on console ports.
Sure. Yeah. They're proceeding well, but it's not. We don't have any announcement. It's proceeding. It's being done by another company, and they're making good progress. But it just takes a lot of time because, as I said, it's a complete rewrite, and then you have to test everything. You have to get all the content working in the new engine. It's just a mountain of work.
Is there further Wildermyth merch that you're thinking about producing? If production costs weren't a concern, what would be the perfect merch item that you would want to offer players?
Ooh, I want a hoodie.
We can make a hoodie. That's not out.
Yeah, we have some.
Make you a hoodie.
We do have some ideas. We have some stuff. We're not gonna announce it because it's not done.
It's not done yet, but yeah, we do have more merch. Some things are designs are in progress. Some things are ideas that are kind of ready to go.
A Mothman cardboard cutout, like
Ooh.
You want full size?
full size.
With the hat, doing the whole thing, just for the corner of your room now.
That seems pretty doable.
When's his birthday? That was birthday.
Oh yeah.
When's your birthday?
I don't actually want that.
Just get a wide format printer. You could get
Yeah, we could
AI
get it.
upscaling.
We could do it.
It's gonna work.
Sorry, what was that, Jackson?
I think I'd love to have just miniatures for D&D purposes or whatever.
Dude,
Dude,
if you could do
they'd be so cool.
if you had some magic 3D artist that could take every single combination of every single Wildermyth piece and like put it into Hero Forge or something, like that would be
exactly not reasonable, but it'd be so cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So, oh, Patrick, did you have anything to add? Sorry.
No, I don't think so. I don't know. If we like a full Wildermyth board game, like board game / D&D
Board game.
campaign.
Yeah.
but
So
I don't know.
other than Wildermyth conversions for
Jackson's been
5e
working on
D&D, have any of you
Jackson
had
done some
plans for a
stuff.
TTRPG or board game version of
I don't think
Wildermyth?
we're
Kind of
gonna
on topic.
plug it, but
It's very
Did
we're having
video freeze.
I've thought about it a lot. I've probably spent more time just thinking about what it would look like, and Nate and I have even talked a little bit. There are some real challenges to overcome. That it was kind of Wildermyth was made for a computer, or for to be a video game in a lot of ways. But there are some narrative things that aren't really focused on in TTRPGs, or again, my limited knowledge of some TTRPGs right now that I think we could do a really cool job of. So yeah.
Yeah, it would be cool.
Hmm.
I don't know if we'll do it.
that is actually the next question, isn't it?
Oh, is it?
That was that question. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
plans
I
for
think you guys cut out for a second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If the DLC is successful, will we see more in the future, like more campaigns? I'll go first. I'll just say that regardless of the financial outcome of this DLC, we do definitely have one more planned, which you've announced. And that will include a new campaign that I'm in the process of writing. And as with all our campaigns, that we'll try to kind of tell a new, different story and broaden the possibilities of the universe. And it'll be directly intertwined with the mechanics that the new DLC introduces.
Yeah, I'll say I've been working on Wildermyth for 10 years, and I'm kind of ready to move on. I'm not completely against doing more stuff, but campaigns in particular are a ton of work. So I don't know if we're likely to see another campaign past that.
I echo that sentiment.
But there's always possibilities, especially like if we could find like a guest writer or somebody that wanted to come on and write something, and if it felt like it was an amazing match, it's something we'd consider. But yeah,
I think
no hard plans right now.
Part of the big issue with that is like just how much people have to get into the tool and get into like all the variation and the splits that go into it, and just like But anyway, never say never.
Yeah, and there's this next DLC is obviously taking up all of our kind of or a lot of our energy at this point. But I'm definitely thinking, using the constraints of keeping the writing scope really limited, what else is possible? Because gameplay wise, I feel like we still have a lot of cool ground.
Yeah, that is something we always hoped that there would be a lot more like full campaigns from the community, and I think that's something that this upcoming game mode would be a pretty good fit for. And so I'm hopeful that we can open that up, make it easier to write stories that that kind of fit in to the new game mode. Lower barrier to entry for a lot of people. That'd be cool.
Yeah, so now we've got like 10 minutes to do Q&A from the chat, I think.
Yeah, what else have we got in here?
So let me go back up a ways. Where was that AI question? There it was. Okay. I'm actually not seeing the other question.
What's the inspiration for the Thrixel in their storyline? In Aluna and the Moth?
In Aluna and the Moth?
Yeah.
What's the inspiration for the Thrixel and their storyline in Aluna and the Moth? Not really an inspiration. I think like ultimately I realized that like it kind of follows some similar beats to a story like even StarCraft with Kerrigan and the Zerg. That stuff I think like inspirations in general and like the stuff is never top of mind for me. I'm never interested in making something that's like a one-to-one, like let's do that story in our game. But like it's inescapable that all that stuff kind of enters your mind, and you sort of fall back on those on familiar ideas, especially for plotting. I think ultimately like I wanted the Thrixel story to be something that sort of has a human element to it, and that's why kind of telling it through the story of Aluna made sense. But I don't know, like a lot of these things, like they kind of just happen as you're writing. Yeah, that's kind of all I can say.
Yeah, that campaign was written twice. Right? Like the first time it was written, it was going to be our second campaign, and it was so different from Ulstrix.
Basic rules of
and it broke a lot of the basic rules, and that like it only.
You had this very scripted first chapter. It was a very short time period. No one retired.
Yeah. So we ended up putting it on the shelf, and doing. And then coming back to it. Yeah, we did Enduring War and Monarchs.
Enduring War and Monarchs.
And then we came back to it. It was a tough, I mean, I love the story. I think it came out good.
It really benefited from the time on the shelf too, I think, and the rewrite really tightened it. So I think that was all good. Yeah, other questions?
Any plans to, in the future, to overhaul the legacy hall, like adding a few screens to organize similar to a Pokemon PC?
Oh.
Furniture?
That's certainly, like, it's a possibility. It wouldn't be impossible.
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff we could do.
Yeah, it's not super high on our list of priorities, I would say. I feel like there are a lot of other things we're focusing on right now, but it's also not out of the question.
Yeah. I've always thought it would be cool if you could customize the legacy browser screen a lot more, like adding scenery or furniture, or like choosing what kind of stuff would be there. It's pretty silly, and I don't know. It might be sort of a lot of work for a few players, but I don't know. I think it'd be cool.
You want to hit that one?
Which one?
Question.
Oh, if you move on from Wildermyth, do you think your next project might still be in the context of the Yondering Lands?
Me?
I think it won't. I think his next project won't. Yeah.
Yeah. So we built. Yeah, the thing is, we built Wildermyth to hold kind of an almost infinite amount of content.
Yeah.
And we have been dumping content into it for years. So it's one of those where it's like, if there are more stories to tell with the Yondering Lands, you would just tell them in Wildermyth. You would make a DLC. You would whatever. You wouldn't make a whole nother game and have to build up all of the content from scratch again, because it's all already kind of here.
I could see us like doing callbacks and references to stuff that we've developed, or even potentially like lifting a monster or a monster group. If it makes sense.
Reinterpreting it, yeah.
But as for it being like a continuous universe, we're not really big on continuity to begin with.
If you're a continuity stickler, this is not the game for you.
Be disappointed. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, we're much more about rebooting and reinterpreting stuff. So I think it's like we have all that stuff as a body of work that we can pull from. But I think, it would be much more likely to be reinterpreting elements than it would be to just using it.
Do we want to talk about player mods?
I
know, Jackson, you've dug into.
I have not played too many of the mods. Again, I'm like, Jackson plays the actual game a lot more than I do. I am mostly just programming. It is a bit of work, but I just love seeing all the things that people do with mods, and like interacting with the modders on Discord is fantastic. I was thinking that like maybe at some time I would like to stream myself playing Memories of the Past or something, because that feels like the first like big full campaign mod that has been made. So I'd be interested to see what that's like. But I'm super fascinated by all of the things that are done to like change the mechanics of the game. Like Smoker has a whole bunch of mods that adjust a whole bunch of things, and there are a lot of armor mods and things.
Yeah, that was something that was really interesting doing QA and kind of at first when we first kind of mods started flowing in, I added dozens to the game and very quickly realized that attempting to do any actual testing of the base game while the mods were on was just not something that would work, because I wouldn't be able to tell if a problem was just for the mod or if it was for the base game. So unfortunately, I spend most of my time playing just kind of the base normal game, but yeah, I know there are folks working on being able to play as Drowvin PCs, which is really cool and something I actually tried to make work at one point, just on my own free time, trying to make a mod for it. And then 10,000 Faces is a really interesting one. I haven't played Memories of the Past yet, but now I'm very curious because I've run through all the base campaigns so many times. I think I've actually seen all the personality splits Doug has written.
That would be shocking to me.
Yeah.
It's possible. But yeah, that was something I really made me really happy about working on this team, is just how constantly when we would create something, the kind of follow up would be, oh yeah, it's going to be really cool to see what players can do with this. Like, it'll be really cool to see this tool in their hands.
Yeah. Any other questions that we want to hit? Oh, here's are there plans to reach out for additional story reels, music armor, hold contests? We do hold a bunch of contests. Bailey does a great job of leading those and just getting the community engaged, which is on Discord a lot. I know there's an active following on Reddit as well, and we've got people in the Steam forums. But yeah, we hold a lot of Discord contests that include recently microfiction, which are in the middle of reading, and we've had art contests for new weapons, and those actually get in the game, which is cool. So we like doing a lot of those things that sort of allow us to put something in the game, like a little artifact for maybe the contest winner to say like, hey, I'm in there, that's me.
Looking at the latest question, and more to say on it, but yeah, I think that was something really important, kind of continuously, is that all of the monster races be pretty distinct from your kind of general fantasy foes.
Mm-hmm.
And they are like kind of spin-offs. Like they are often like kind of like, if we want something orc adjacent, we kind of go to the Drowvin, and they are sort of a like stand-in for that.
They're the most human.
Yeah, it was really important for us
to
not just take stuff off the shelf.
To
really like put in the time and effort to develop our own stuff. And yeah, like you do end up with, especially in a game, you need things to fight, and you want monsters that fill out those sort of narrative archetypes, and so you end up using stuff where you can kind of see the analogs, right? It's like, oh, they live underground. Well, they drow. Well, I mean, not exactly. There's important differences, but yeah, of course, there's going to be some similarities. I think anytime where you have those sort of narrative needs and game-driven needs, you'll end up with those broad similarities. We definitely wanted to develop our own stuff. That was important.
Any future plans for multiplayer? Any new developments on that side?
No. If you have thoughts on things that you want in multiplayer, feel free to like throw them in Discord or on Steam forums or whatever. Like, we're not planning on doing any PvP or anything, and we feel like in terms of how the multiplayer works, other than like maybe adding things like voting on choices and maybe adjusting the controls a little bit, because sometimes they can be a little clunky, but we don't have any big plans to change there. Just
Yeah, voting on
terms of
choices would be cool.
locking cameras to specific players. I think you can adjust camera settings in the settings so that it won't go to other players moving, maybe, and that might help you with what you're looking at in canon. Yeah, I don't know. All right,
Camera settings.
it is 2:01. Do we want to call it here?
It's 11:01.
Oh, sorry.
It's 2:01.
It is. It's 2:01 Eastern time.
It has been 2 hours.
It has been 2 hours from when we started. Yeah.
We timed that pretty well.
New objects and therefore new interfusions.
I mean, sometimes like as I don't
We
think there'll
don't
be
have
new
anything
interfusion
on
recipes.
deck right now.
Yeah.
I think the tricky part about that too is like back populating that stuff into
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
every situation where it could be used. But
Let's see, yeah.
The
There
one
are
thing that
cases where we could consider it.
that's pretty moddable too, right?
Yeah.
yeah, you just make a new aspect. And then you
Yes,
make
it's
it
definitely audible. Yeah.
Yeah, I might end up going through and making sure that, scenery types are properly represented. There might be a few places where, something should have shards that doesn't have shards, but it wouldn't include any new interfusion abilities. It'd just be
The initiative system.
Oh,
I
we
like
can
this
do that.
question.
Why don't we have an initiative system?
Well,
We talk about descent.
yeah, so the main inspirations from like our point of view, I was playing a game called Descent Journeys in the Dark and playing XCOM. And they're both simultaneous initiative kind of things where you can move heroes in any order. The great thing about that is the tactical depth that it gives you.
You can craft
Because
your turn a lot.
you can craft your turn, and for us, a lot of the fun was in crafting our turns. Like, oh, if that person moves first, then this person can get the flank and all that sort of thing, right? Where
Making it so that the heroes can create setups for each other, kind of.
right, yeah, where you get all this beautiful teamwork, and just having a big open space for that teamwork to happen in, I think works a lot better in this kind of initiative system. We also didn't originally build the game for multiplayer. And in terms of like, we were focusing on the single player experience for most of the combat development. So that's probably why it's like feels a little chaotic, for sure. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna say we call it there. If everyone's all right with that.
Sorry.
Do we want to call it there and say we end the call, or are there other things anyone wants to answer?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining.
I love doing these. I don't know.
Yeah.
I love you too.
Yeah. We're really excited for the next DLC too.
Yes.
Yes. Now we get
It's
to
going to be good.
really buckle down on that.
Yep. Awesome.
Have a good
Thanks,
one.
everyone.
Take care.
Um,